The weight of tomorrow. The alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., and Theo Maxwell's hand silenced it before the sound could travel down the hallway. In the dim light of his worn apartment, he sat on the edge of his bed, shoulders curved with exhaustion. Through the thin wall, he could hear the gentle breathing of his daughter, Penelope, the rhythm slightly irregular, a constant reminder of the condition slowly claiming her heart. Another day, he whispered to himself, a mantra that had carried him through 3 years of single parenthood after his wife's death. At 34, the lines around his eyes told stories of sleepless nights and endless worry. By 5:15, Theo was already on the bus to his first job at Henderson's Diner, where he flipped pancakes and scrambled eggs until noon. Mrs. Henderson, a widow herself, slipped him leftover muffins at the end of each shift. "For that sweet girl of yours," she'd say with a knowing smile. Those muffins were sometimes the only thing that brought light to Penelope's increasingly tired eyes. After the diner came the warehouse job, loading boxes until his back screamed in protest. Then 3 hours as a night janitor at an office building downtown. The pay from all 3 jobs combined barely covered rent, food, and Penelope's medications. Her medical bills had long since exceeded anything he could manage, piling up in a drawer he couldn't bear to open anymore. "Daddy, will you tell me about the stars again?" Penelope asked that evening as he tucked her into bed. At 8 years old, her face was too pale, her body too thin, but her eyes held a wisdom that sometimes startled him. "Which one's tonight, Penny?" he asked, brushing back her chestnut hair. "The one about Perseus." "He was brave," Theo smiled wearily. "Yes, he was. Just like you." He began the story, watching as his daughter's eyes grew heavy. Her small chest rose and fell unevenly beneath her favorite blue pajamas. Dr. Whitmore had been clear during their last visit. "Without surgery in the next few months, I can't promise." The doctor hadn't finished, but he didn't need to. The procedure cost $287,000. Might as well have been $1 billion. After Penelope fell asleep, Theo retreated to the kitchen table, spreading out bills and calculations he'd done 100 times before. No matter how he moved the numbers, they never added up to enough. He'd applied for every assistance program, reached out to every charity. The partial approvals and wait list wouldn't save Penelope in time. His phone buzzed. A text from Beth, his neighbor who watched Penelope when he worked nights. "She had another episode. Small one. Didn't want to worry you during work." Theo's hands trembled as he set down the phone. He moved silently to Penelope's doorway, watching her sleep. In the glow of her nightlight, she looked peaceful, almost normal. Almost. Tomorrow he had an appointment with Dr. Whitmore again. Another update. Another reminder of what he couldn't provide. Theo slid down against the wall, his face in his hands. He had always found a way, always figured something out, but now as the clock ticked forward, he was running out of options, out of time, out of hope. "I promised your mother I'd keep you safe," he whispered into the darkness. "I don't know how, Penny, but I'm going to find a way." In his pocket was a business card for Northwestern Memorial Hospital's financial department. Tomorrow, after the appointment, he would try one more time. He had nothing left to lose. Desperate measures, the fluorescent lights of Northwestern Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across Dr. Whitmore's face as she delivered the news Theo had been dreading. "Penelope's condition has deteriorated faster than we anticipated. The arrhythmia is becoming more frequent, and her latest echocardiogram shows significant progression." She slid the images across her desk. "We need to perform the surgery within 3 weeks. Any longer would be..." She paused, meeting Theo's eyes with professional compassion. "Would be what?" Theo asked, though he already knew. "Potentially catastrophic." Penelope sat in the children's waiting area with Beth, unaware that her timeline was being measured in weeks, not months. Through the office window, Theo could see her drawing, her small hand occasionally pausing to rest. "I understand the financial constraints," Dr. Whitmore continued, "but I've exhausted all the hospital's assistance programs. Even with the partial coverage we've secured, you're still looking at nearly $200,000. Theo nodded mechanically, the number hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Thank you for trying," he managed to say. As he left the office, his legs felt weighted with concrete. He checked his watch 30 minutes before his afternoon shift. "Just enough time. Beth, can you take Penny home? There's something I need to do." He knelt beside his daughter, forcing brightness into his voice. I'll be home for dinner and we'll have spaghetti night, okay? Penelope nodded, her eyes too knowing for her age. You promise? Cross my heart, Theo replied, making the gesture that had become their ritual. The financial services department was on the 5th floor. As Theo rode the elevator, he rehearsed what he would say, though no words seemed adequate. How do you explain that your child's life is worth more than money, when money is exactly what you need to save it? The receptionist directed him to wait. Mr. Blackwell is in a meeting, but he should be available shortly. Theo sat, then stood, then paced. 20 minutes passed. His shift at the warehouse would start soon. Another missed day, another warning, but none of that mattered now. In the adjacent hallway, unnoticed by Theo, a man stepped out of the elevator. Dominic Harrington moved with the quiet assurance of someone accustomed to not being recognized despite his vast wealth. At 52, his salt and pepper hair and understated clothing gave him the appearance of any successful businessman, rather than the founder of Harrington Technologies. Worth $27 billion, Dominic had come for his quarterly cardiac checkup, a precaution since the heart attack that had claimed his brother 3 years ago. The same event that had led him to withdraw from public life, despite his company's continued success. As he waited for his doctor, he noticed the man pacing, the desperation evident in every movement. When the financial officer's door finally opened, Theo didn't wait for an invitation. Mr. Blackwell, please, I need to speak with you about my daughter. The balding man sighed, clearly having had this conversation before. Mr. Maxwell, we've reviewed your case multiple times. Her condition is worse. The doctors say 3 weeks. Please, there has to be something, some program, some fund. Theo's voice cracked. I've sold everything. I work 3 jobs. I'll sign whatever you need. Payment plans for the rest of my life, anything. The hospital isn't a charity, Mr. Maxwell. She's 8 years old. Theo's outburst silenced the corridor. She likes stars and chocolate ice cream and wants to be a veterinarian. She's all I have left in this world. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm begging you. Not as a client, not as a patient. As a father. Please don't let my little girl die because I can't write a check. From his position around the corner, Dominic Harrington stood frozen. The raw anguish in the man's voice had cut through the careful emotional distance he'd maintained from the world. It reminded him of his own voice 3 years ago, pleading with doctors to save his brother, even with all his billions rendered useless against time and fate. Mr. Blackwell's response was professional but firm. I sympathize with your situation, but there's nothing more we can do. I suggest you look into hospice options, which are more affordable and can provide comfort. Comfort while she dies? Theo's legs finally gave way and he sank into a chair. That's your solution? Dominic stepped back unseen, his mind racing. For 3 years he'd buried himself in work and isolation, his wealth accumulating while he felt nothing. Now something stirred, recognition, perhaps of a pain that money couldn't solve. Yet in this case, money was precisely the solution. As Theo left the financial office, shoulders bent in defeat, Dominic made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called the one person he still trusted implicitly. Janet, I need you to do something for me immediately and with absolute discretion. That evening, as Theo prepared spaghetti with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, his phone rang with a call that would change everything. Silent Guardian, Mr. Maxwell? This is Dr. Whitmore. The voice on the phone carried an unusual note of surprise. Something remarkable has happened. I need you to come in tomorrow morning. Theo clutched the phone tighter, spaghetti sauce forgotten on the stove. Is it Penelope? Has she? No, nothing like that. Dr. Whitmore hastened to clarify. It's about her treatment. I can't discuss details over the phone, but it's important we speak in person. After hanging up, Theo stood motionless in his tiny kitchen, afraid to hope. He'd spent the afternoon filling out applications for emergency loans he knew he wouldn't qualify for. The rejection seemed inevitable, like the tide coming in. Daddy, the sauce is bubbling too much. Penelope's voice snapped him back to reality. She stood in the doorway, one hand pressed lightly against her chest, a habit she'd developed when her heart fluttered. Sorry, Penny girl, he said, turning down the heat. Got distracted by an important call. From the doctor? Her perception sometimes startled him. Yes, he admitted, knowing better than to lie. We need to go back tomorrow. Will it hurt? The simplicity of her question broke his heart. No, sweetheart. Just talking this time. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Dominic Harrington sat before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching lights shimmer on the water. The spacious apartment felt as empty as it had for the past 3 years, yet something had shifted inside him. Janet Chen, his chief of staff for over a decade, placed a folder on his desk. It's done. The hospital received an anonymous donation specifically for Penelope Maxwell's surgery and aftercare. The transfer was completed an hour ago, and they've accepted it? With some confusion, but yes. $290,000 is hard to question, especially when it comes with ironclad legal documentation. Dominic nodded, opening the folder. Inside were photos of Theo and Penelope Maxwell, taken from hospital records that Janet had acquired through means better left unquestioned. The little girl's smile, despite her evident illness, stirred something in Dominic he thought had died with his brother. "What made you do this?" Janet asked, her professional demeanor softening. Since Gregory's death, she'd watched Dominic retreat from the world, from the philanthropic work that had once been his passion, alongside building his tech empire. Dominic touched the photo lightly. "I heard him today. The father. He reminded me of myself with Gregory, except this child still has a chance." He closed the folder. "Did you arrange the other matter?" "Yes. We've created a position for him at Harrington Foundations as you requested, starting after his daughter's recovery. The salary is generous, the hours will accommodate her care, and he'll never know it was specifically created for him." "Good." Dominic turned back to the window. "Make sure my name stays out of it completely. This isn't about recognition." Janet studied her employer's profile, seeing a spark of the man he'd been before grief hollowed him. "May I ask why the secrecy?" "Most billionaires would want the PR. I'm not most billionaires," he replied simply. "And this isn't charity. It's," he paused, searching for words, "it's recognition of what matters." The next morning, Theo sat stunned in Dr. Whitmore's office as she explained the impossible. "An anonymous donor has covered all expenses for Penelope's surgery and post-operative care. We can schedule the procedure for next week." "That's not possible," Theo whispered. "Who would—" "The donor specified complete anonymity," Dr. Whitmore emphasized. "But I can tell you this is legitimate. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of practice." Theo pressed his palms against his eyes, shoulders shaking. "Are you saying Penny's going to get her surgery?" "That she'll be okay." Dr. Whitmore smiled, her professional detachment momentarily breaking. "We can never promise outcomes, but yes, she's getting the best chance possible." When Theo told Penelope, her response was childishly practical. "Does this mean I get to keep my heart?" He laughed through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. Your heart is staying right where it belongs." That night, while Penelope slept, Theo sat by her bedside watching her breathe. The weight that had pressed him into the ground for months had lifted, leaving him almost dizzy with relief. Yet questions circled his mind like restless birds. Who would do this? Why? How could he ever express gratitude for something so immeasurable? Meanwhile, Dominic worked late in his office, reviewing quarterly reports without really seeing them. Janet had kept him updated on developments. The surgery was scheduled. The father had been informed. Everything was proceeding without his direct involvement, exactly as he wanted. Yet something felt unfinished. For the first time in years, Dominic felt curiosity about another person's life. What had brought Theo Maxwell to this point? What kind of man works 3 jobs and still stands with such dignity while begging for his child's life? Impulsively, he pulled up the hospital's live security feed. Another capability Janet had quietly arranged. In a small room on the pediatric floor, he saw Theo sitting beside his sleeping daughter, his hand gently resting on hers, his lips moving in what might have been prayer or promises. Dominic recognized the tableau. He'd sat the same way beside Gregory in those final days. But this vigil had hope woven through its fabric, while his had only been goodbye. He closed the laptop, an unfamiliar emotion tightening his chest. It wasn't quite peace, but perhaps its distant cousin. For 3 years he'd been a ghost in his own life, his wealth a meaningless accumulation. Now watching another man's burden lift had somehow lightened his own. Dominic walked to his bedroom but paused at the door of the room he never entered. Gregory's room, preserved exactly as his brother had left it. Tonight, for the first time, he turned the handle and stepped inside. The revelation, the day of Penelope's surgery, arrived with a crystalline autumn sky. Theo walked the hospital corridors with his daughter, a ritual the nurses suggested to calm pre-surgical nerves. "Will I have a scar like a pirate?" Penelope asked, her hand small within his. "A small one," Theo replied, grateful for her innocence. "But scars are just stories our bodies tell. Like constellations," she nodded seriously. "Connect the dot adventures." As they rounded the corner near the surgical wing, Theo nearly collided with a tall, distinguished man accompanied by a sharp-featured woman carrying a tablet. "I'm sorry," Theo apologized, stepping aside. Something in the man's intense gaze made Theo pause. There was recognition there, though Theo was certain they'd never met. The man's expensive suit and commanding presence spoke of wealth and influence, yet his eyes held something unexpectedly vulnerable. "No harm done," the man replied, his voice deep and measured. His gaze shifted to Penelope, softening visibly. "Big day today?" Penelope nodded. "I'm getting my heart fixed. Are you scared?" the man asked, crouching slightly despite his formal attire. "A little," she admitted, "but Daddy says brave people still get scared sometimes." "Your father is very wise," the man said, something unreadable crossing his features. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small polished stone. "This is a wishing stone. I've carried it for good luck. Perhaps you'd like to borrow it today?" Penelope accepted the stone with solemn reverence. "Thank you, mister." The woman beside him checked her watch meaningfully. "Mr. Harrington, your meeting—" "Of course, Janet." He straightened, nodding to Theo. "Good luck today. To both of you." As they walked away, Theo felt an inexplicable connection to the stranger. Something about the man's presence had been almost familiar, though he couldn't place why. Hours later, as Penelope underwent surgery, Theo paced the waiting room. Beth brought coffee and sandwiches he couldn't eat. His mind kept returning to the strange encounter, the name tickling at his memory. Harrington. On impulse, he searched the name on his phone. The results made him freeze mid-step. Dominic Harrington, founder and CEO of Harrington Technologies. Estimated worth, $27 billion. The accompanying photo confirmed it was indeed the man from the hallway. Why would a tech billionaire be touring Northwestern Memorial? And why had he spoken to Penelope with such genuine interest? A wild, impossible thought struck Theo. Could Harrington be the anonymous donor? The timing of their encounter seemed too coincidental. Yet why would a billionaire who'd never met them take such interest in Penelope's case? When Dr. Whitmore finally emerged with news that the surgery had been successful, Theo's relief temporarily pushed aside his questions. He spent the night at Penelope's bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, the monitors showing a stronger, more regular heartbeat than she'd had in years. The following morning, as Penelope slept peacefully, Theo made a decision. He needed to know. "I'll be back in 30 minutes, he told Beth, who had arrived early with fresh clothes for him. "Call me immediately if she wakes up." The hospital's administrative offices were quieter on Saturday. Theo approached the receptionist with determination. "I need to speak with someone about the donation for Penelope Maxwell's surgery." "Sir, those records are confidential." "I'm her father," Theo pressed. "I just need to know who to thank." The receptionist's expression softened. "I understand, but the donor specifically requested anonymity. We're legally bound to respect that." As Theo turned to leave, disappointed but not surprised, he noticed a familiar figure by the elevators, the woman who had accompanied Harrington. "Janet," he recalled. What kind of proposition? "The Harrington Foundation needs people who understand the value of things beyond money. People with your kind of perspective," Theo hesitated, suspicious of charity disguised as opportunity. Reading his expression, Dominic added, "This isn't pity, Mr. Maxwell. It's recognition of worth." "I'll consider it," Theo said cautiously. "But right now—" "Your daughter needs you," Dominic finished for him. "As it should be." Full circle 1 year later, autumn painted Chicago in amber and crimson. Penelope Maxwell raced ahead on the walking path of Lincoln Park, her cardigan flapping behind her like wings. At 9 years old, the scar on her chest was now just another constellation in her personal sky, a reminder of battles won and second chances granted. "Daddy, look. The leaves are dancing," she called back to Theo, who walked alongside Dominic Harrington, both men watching her with quiet joy. "She has more energy than I remember having at her age," Dominic observed, his typically formal demeanor softened by a year of regular interaction with the Maxwells. "The doctors say her heart is stronger than they expected," Theo replied. "Sometimes I still wake up at night just to check that she's breathing normally." Old habits. The past year had transformed both men's lives in ways neither could have anticipated during that first real conversation in the hospital lounge. Theo now served as outreach director for the newly expanded Harrington Foundation, overseeing programs that provided medical assistance to families caught in financial gaps. His first-hand experience navigating the healthcare labyrinth made him uniquely qualified to reshape the foundation's approach. For Dominic, the change had been more subtle, but no less profound. The walls he'd built around himself since Gregory's death had begun to crumble, one brick at a time. His return to public philanthropy had surprised the business world, though he still shunned interviews and galas in favor of more direct involvement. The board approved the expansion to 3 more hospitals, Dominic said as they walked. "Your proposal was compelling." "It wasn't just mine," Theo demurred. "The whole team contributed." "But it was your story that moved them," Dominic insisted. "Numbers and statistics don't change hearts. Stories do." They reached a bench overlooking the pond where Penelope was now tossing breadcrumbs to eager ducks, her laughter carrying across the water. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Theo said, watching his daughter. "That day in the hospital hallway before the surgery, did you plan to run into us?" Dominic's rare smile appeared. "Janet would say there are no coincidences, only orchestrated opportunities." "That's not an answer." "Perhaps I needed to see her," Dominic admitted. "To remind myself that this wasn't just a transaction, that there was a real child, a real father." He paused. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful you tracked me down afterward." Theo nodded, understanding the weight of that admission from a man who had once valued privacy above all else. "The job offer was unexpected. Self-serving, actually," Dominic replied. "The foundation needed someone who understood both sides of the equation. Empathy and pragmatism in equal measure." From his pocket, Dominic withdrew a small velvet box and handed it to Theo. "For Penelope, 1 year of her new heart deserves commemoration." Inside the box lay a delicate silver necklace with a small star-shaped pendant, tiny diamonds catching the autumn sunlight. "Dominic, this is too much." "It's nothing," the billionaire interrupted gently. "Besides, Janet picked it out. Apparently, I have abysmal taste in children's jewelry." This casual mention of Janet by her first name wasn't lost on Theo. The strictly professional relationship between Dominic and his chief of staff had warmed considerably in recent months. Another wall slowly crumbling. "Penny!" Theo called. "Come see what Mr. Harrington brought you." Penelope bounded over, cheeks flushed with health and excitement. When she saw the necklace, her eyes widened. "It's like a real star." "For my favorite astronomer," Dominic said as Theo helped fasten it around her neck. "Can I show the ducks?" she asked, already turning back toward the pond. "Don't get too close to the edge," Theo cautioned, watching her skip away. "You've done remarkable work with her," Dominic observed. "She carries no shadow of her illness. Children are resilient. It's adults who hold on to pain." Theo glanced sideways at his employer and friend. "Speaking of which, Janet mentioned you finally cleared out Gregory's room." Dominic was quiet for a moment. "Yes, it was time. Some of his things went to medical research facilities. The rest," he shrugged. "The past belongs in the past. The present has proven more compelling than I expected." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Penelope charming the ducks. The Foundation's newest initiative, a program specifically designed to catch families before they reached financial breaking points, had been Dominic's idea, but bore Theo's practical influence. Together, they'd created something neither could have accomplished alone. "You know," Theo said eventually, "a year ago I thought receiving that anonymous donation was the miracle. I was wrong." "Oh?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "The money saved Penny's life, yes, but the real miracle was what happened after. Finding purpose again, seeing you find yours." Theo met the billionaire's gaze directly. "The money was just the beginning of the story, not the end." Dominic nodded slowly. "When Gregory died, I thought that was the end of my story too. I existed, I accumulated wealth, but I wasn't living." He watched Penelope twirl, her necklace catching the light. "I never expected to find meaning in a hospital hallway." "Life rarely follows the expected path," Theo agreed. Later that evening, After Dominic had returned to his penthouse and Penelope was tucked in bed, Theo sat at his kitchen table reviewing applications for the Foundation's newest program. Each family's story echoed his own from a year before: desperate parents, sick children, impossible choices. But now, instead of helplessness, he felt purpose. Each file represented not just a problem to solve, but a story to change. On his refrigerator hung a child's drawing, Penelope's rendering of the night sky, with one particular star shining brighter than the rest. Beneath it, in her careful handwriting, "For Daddy and Mr. H, the best constellation." Theo smiled at the drawing. The universe worked in strange ways. A year ago, he'd been broken by the weight of tomorrow. Now tomorrow itself was a gift he no longer feared. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Dominic. Thinking about expanding the cardiac program to include research grants. Gregory's legacy deserves more than memory. The response came quickly. Monday, 9 a.m., bring coffee and your ideas. Janet says hello. Theo set down his phone, feeling the quiet contentment of a life rebuilt on stronger foundations. Outside his window, the stars shimmered, distant, yet somehow more attainable than they had seemed a year ago. Sometimes the greatest distance wasn't between wealth and poverty, but between isolation and connection. Between seeing value only in what could be counted and recognizing worth in what couldn't. Penelope's laughter echoed from her bedroom. She was talking to her stuffed animals again, creating adventures for them among her imaginary stars. The sound filled their small apartment with something greater than any penthouse could contain. Theo closed the file he was reading and walked to his daughter's doorway, simply watching her play. The miracle wasn't just that she was alive, it was that her life had saved two men from very different kinds of poverty, and in that knowledge both had found a wealth beyond measure.